Hey there, guys. We now have the information for Curse of Immunity Melissa, the new global exclusive unit coming for early March. And in this video, we're going to take a look at her kit now that it's available. So first of all, her base stats. Overall, they're nothing special. They're good. They're not bad. It's just like she doesn't have anything unusually high for base stats. They're just, pretty much as expected for a support unit. As far as her base resistances and immunities, overall pretty good. 30 or better resistance to every single element, and she's immune to all the important statuses except for Confuse. But that's pretty easily fixed by gear, so not that big a deal. But there it is. And as far as her equipment selection, a little bit more restrictive than things like Sylvie. She can't use heavy armor, heavy shields, or heavy helms, but she can use pretty much everything else that matters. For her weapon, you're always going to use the STMR, pretty much. And then for the rest of the equipment, it's good. It's just your as expected support unit. Gearing, stats, etc. She does have access to all the magic in the game, so that's pretty cool. Level 9 to all 3. Now, as far as her kit, now at just a brief glance, I will say, after going over her and looking, I don't think she quite measures up to Sylvie in terms of like an overall support unit. Melissa does seem very good. It's just like, when I compare her to the cream of the crop, like Sylvie, I do still think Sylvie holds the crown as best support unit ever, but Melissa is still very good. So we're going to go ahead and go through her kit. So she has shared immunity. This is immunity to all statuses, all breaks, and she cures them, and she makes a 5-turn immunity, and it's a 70% resist all buff. Now, of course, we're going to compare her to Sylvie. Sylvie has the same thing, except Sylvie can also do stop and charm. Melissa cannot do stop and charm. She has no way to cure stop and charm, and she has no way to buff immunity to stop and charm. So, like I said, like almost as good as Sylvie, but not quite as good. And as far as the resistances go, Sylvie has 80 to all. We're only at 70 to all here. So it seems like they kind of started at Sylvie as a baseline and took a small step backwards because, I guess Sylvie was too good, which is kind of true. But yeah, they're kind of like dialing it back a little bit for Melissa. So, similar to Sylvie, but slightly lower. She has permanent triple cast, which is nice. It seems to be for her entire kit. I didn't double check, but I think it's for the whole kit. It's hard to tell in the wiki if it's one of these skills are excluded or not, but it looks like the whole kit. As far as killers, she has killers to 3 different races: Beast, Dragon, and Human. They're on a 1-turn cooldown, which basically means she can use it every single turn, but she can't multicast the same one in the same turn. So she can do 250 to 1 target for 2 turns every turn. And also it's an AoE 5 turn. So it's basically the same thing as Sylvie. Sylvie has the same thing as this, but hers are for Beast, Dragon, and Human. She's got a one-time Magnus where she imbues everyone with darkness, including the enemies, including the bosses, and the entire party gets dark absorbed for a turn. So it's pretty cool. It's basically like Kresnik's Magnus, but for 1 turn only. But we're going to get to a better version of this in a moment. But this is available everywhere, including Dark Visions, Trials, etc. Just as a preview, she does have a better version of this for Clash of Wills only. We're going to get to that in a minute. She's got this. Now we know what Chronic Flow is. So it's available on turn 1. When you cast it, it's a huge morale gain, some LB fill and mana fill for the party, and then every single turn for eternity, same as Kresnik, as long as she doesn't die, it will auto-cast 1,000 morale per turn, 5 LB per turn, and 100 MP per turn for the rest of the encounter. That's incredibly good. I'm going to double check that this is included in her multicast. Chronic Flow, it is. Okay, yeah, I was about to say, maybe it's not as good if she has to use her whole turn doing that, but no, it's included in the multicast. So yeah, very nice. That's a great skill. So 1,000 MP, 1,000 morale per turn. She has a lot of morale, though. We're going to see in a minute. She actually feels, I think, more morale than Kresnik when we get to the rest of her stuff. But also, I should mention that these killer skills also feel 350 morale per cast. So, a lot of morale. Seconds of support. This is a really cool ability. So, it's not available until turn 6. You cannot use this at the start of the fight. She does have ways in her kit to speed this up. When we get to her LB and SLB, it's like they got the time magic cooldown reduction. So it doesn't have to be on turn 6, but naturally, it's not available until turn 6. It's a single target only, 400 all stat buff, 300 LB buff, 30x modifier buff, only for morale-based damage. Now this is for LB modifier morale-based damage. So this is things like 2B's LB or what's it called? Chizuru's LB, stuff like that. It's not going to work on things like Sephiroth's LB. But I asked our resident data miner Salian, and he did say this does stack with Sylvie's modifier buff. So if they're both on the party, these modifier buffs stack. And when she's in Clash of Wills, it can scale up to a 60x modifier. And keep in mind, this will double dip on LBs that hit twice, like for example, or not hit twice, but have a multi-part component. Like 2B and Chizuru, it's going to apply twice, so it's a 120x modifier buff, for example, for 2B. So, really good. And it also fills LB gauge by 1,000 to 1 ally. So basically it fills up their LB gauge to the maximum. And this is usable every 6 turns. So pretty good, pretty good. But it is a little awkward that you can't use it until turn 6 or sooner if you speed up her own cooldowns. Then she has this thing, Parasol Shield. It's basically just it's mostly just a mitigation buff against Beast, Human, Dragon. She's got 55 to both magical and physical mitigation for those races. Really, really good when those races apply. Pretty worthless when it doesn't. But it also includes a barrier, 5,000 barrier outside of Clash of Wills, and in Clash of Wills up to 15,000, depending on your morale gauge. So not nearly as good as someone like Abigail, but still, it's pretty decent. And it also AoE auto revives the whole party, so re-raise the entire party, and it's available on turn 1. So pretty good. Now this is one of her skills that I'm a little less happy about. Minutes of Might. So it's an AoE 300 all stat buff and 250 LB buff for the party. It's only a 3-turn duration and a 5-turn cooldown. And this is her only stat buff in her entire kit, not counting the single target one up here. That's, a long cooldown. But this is the only party stat buff in her kit. And without using her cooldown reduction thing all on herself to keep this full uptime, she can't maintain a stat buff for the party, which is a little unfortunate. That being said, it's not the biggest deal because she does have permanent access spirit buff for the whole party at 300, and then she can permanent buff defense by 200 with protect and shell. We'll get to that in a minute as well. But as far as attack and magic buff, she just can't maintain it for the party. And this is more of a big deal for trial content. For Dark Visions, who cares? It's a 1-turn thing. But for trial content, if she's your buffer for a trial, it's a little awkward that she can't be your only offensive buffer, or at least she can't without going through a lot of headache by micromanaging her cooldown reduction always on herself. Yeah, it's just really unfortunate that she can't maintain an attack and magic buff in a trial. I wish she could. And that's not, that's not the end of the world, but it's just I don't really see the reason to make this partial uptime. This buff is not so strong that it needs to be partial uptime. It's like a stat buff. These are the most generic buff we have in the entire game, and this was determined to be. They felt like this needed to be partial uptime. For what reason? This to me just feels like making it tedious and irritating just for the sake of it. I personally don't see a game balance reason this is only a 3-turn uptime and 5-turn cooldown. Anyway, you get the idea. She does have a stat buff. It's a very awkward stat buff, but it's there. Then she has an AoE Dark Imbue with a 45 amplify. So this is on a cooldown as well, but this one is full uptime, so that's fine. If it does get dispelled before the cooldown is available, she does have on demand a 35 version, so down here. So she can end Dark anytime she wants for a 35%, or for an Imbue with 35 amp, but the 45 one is on a cooldown, so if it gets dispelled, you gotta wait or refresh the cooldown. And then from the news, we already kind of knew she had the Dark Imbue at 100%, on a Magnus, 2 uses per battle. Now, it turns out she only has Darkness. We were kind of speculating in the news, maybe she has other elements they didn't preview. Nope, it's just Darkness. So she is all in for Darkness and no other element. But yeah, it's the same thing as Sylvie's. It takes away your imbues and swaps you to Dark, and then after 2 turns, you're at 100% Amplify for 1 turn, and then you can do it twice for battle. So still pretty good. Let's jump down to the rest of her active skills. She also has a lot of magic in her kit. So she has Healing, Curaga, and again, I've talked about it before, you don't really have Curaga on demand these days. This is like the standard for party healing. Although, I will real quick skip down here, she does have Curaga on her LB. So if you do need like a 150,000 point heal, her SLB will do that for you. And then a slightly smaller version on the regular LB. But yeah, she has Curaga on demand. She has Darga and Darkra, which we don't care about the damage. But basically that means she has Chaos Wave Awakened and Bolting Strike Chaining Frames, which is kind of nice. She can only triple cast them by default, but you could give her the Earnese Ring, and then she could quad cast these as well as a support chainer if you really wanted to. Pretty nice. Full life +2, AoE full raise, Bard Darkja, which is, this is kind of standard these days for support units, the Bard resist just spell. She has the Dark version, 200 to all allies, all the mitigation, 10 LB. It's really good to have. We talked about this. She has re-raise, pretty typical, and then Protect and Shell. Now she has Shell +3, which is awesome. Only Protect +2. A little unfortunate. I would really have wished her to have the other way around. I wish she had Protect +3 and Shell +2, because we just got Abigail, and I would really love for Melissa to fill in all the gaps in Abigail's kit. So now if you're running Abigail and Melissa, you still only have a maximum of 50% physical mitigation, which depending on the fight might be too low or it might be fine. Really depends on the fight. It just would have been so much nicer for her to be the complement to the other unit we just got. Instead, they're kind of both overlapping. They're both doing Protect +2 and Shell +3. Whatever. And then her LB and SLB. So the regular LB is a 1-turn cooldown for an ally for their skills, 75 mitigation and AoE revive, and then a small heal. And then the SLB, basically the same thing, just better. So we have a 2-turn cooldown, a full Curaga level heal, 80% mitigation, and then the AoE revive, same thing on that one. So pretty nice. Now real quick, let's jump over to her passives. At EX2, start of the fight, she's going to give herself only a 25,000 point barrier, which is pretty cool. I guess it's not super relevant because it's only for her, and she's definitely not going to be the squishiest unit on your party, but I guess it's cool. Whatever, it's cool. This is the more interesting one. As a preemptive, she AoE gives the entire party re-raise for basically the entire fight. So until someone dies or gets dispelled, they've got re-raise for free. So without you doing anything, your whole party is re-raising. That's just pretty cool. So, it's I guess it's not as cool as you would think, just because if you're using her, you're going to be using the LB or the SLB, and this does it anyway, so you're kind of going to have re-raise regardless. It's still just a cool little neat addition, that a permanent duration re-raise, so if you happen to forget about it or something, it's there until someone triggers it or it gets dispelled. It's just kind of neat. So at EX3, more stats, mana reduction, etc. But more importantly, she auto-cast Curse Dark Energy every turn, and this is a 500 morale fill. So this is in addition, remember, to the Chronic Flow, 1,000 every turn. At EX3, you're getting 500 per turn, and all Melissas, even EX0, they also cast it again. So at EX0 to 2, you're casting 500 plus Chronic, so 1,500 per turn for free. At EX3, you're getting 2,000 morale per turn completely passively before any other gear or skills, etc. I'm including Chronic Flow as well. So if, for example, you're triple casting her killers, that would be 2,000 plus 350 times 3. So that would be like 3,100 morale per turn if you include her vision card. That's 3,500 morale per turn. That is definitely better than Kresnik. So she is like the new best morale battery in the entire game, which is pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. And then she has, this is kind of interesting, decreases being targeted by 100%, which is the same thing as Kresnik. So, as I talked about before, when camouflage is 100% in a single source, there's no multiplicative reductions, meaning she will never ever be targeted by a single target attack unless she's the last man standing, or unless the entire party has 100% camouflage. It's like her and Kresnik are both alive, then just randomly picks one, so it's got to pick somebody. But she'll never be targeted by a random target attack, which is, I guess, good and bad. Because it also means, because, as a support unit, she's going to be usually much bulkier than your DPS anyway. So you kind of rather random target attacks hit your support units instead of your DPS, because your DPS are going to be the squishy ones. So this is almost a double-edged sword. It does mean that when the fight is going horribly and everyone's dying, she'll be the last one killed, meaning she can potentially recover you with like AoE revive, re-raise, etc. So maybe, if the whole party's dying and she survives, she can get the party back alive. So it's good sometimes, and it's bad other times when the boss randomly chooses, a 40,000 point nuke to hit somebody. You'd rather it hit her and not like your Sky. But it's there. Now here's some more interesting stuff. Enabled hasten recovery and all-consuming darkness when the morale gauge is above 0. So basically, this just means when you're in morale content. Basically Clash of Wills, but also Chamber of Vengeance. That's kind of it. So wherever you see the morale gauge, these skills will be available. So what they are these two skills. So Hastened Recovery is a Magnus 3 times per battle, and it consumes her entire LB gauge. You cannot cast this if her LB gauge is not maximum full at the time. But what it does is, so it's a decrease of reduction by 5 turns to stat breaks, imperils. It also cures. This is kind of strange. So why would it reduce the duration and cure? Anyway, that's a little bit redundant. That's very strange. So it reduces the duration and it cures them. Okay, strange, whatever. But also it gives you an immunity buff. It gives you a 100 to resist to all elements and a 150 to dark. But more importantly, it also reduces by 5 turns the duration of an unknown effect. So what that means is, the data miner, it's a new effect that has not existed before on global. So the data miners don't have the parser updated for it. But basically what we can kind of assume here, this is going to be some kind of interaction with a Clash of Wills boss, because it's an effect that doesn't exist on the JP server. Otherwise, the data miners would have the data tools already updated for that effect. So this should be updated, by the time server comes up. The wiki should have it updated. We'll know exactly what this is, but we can pretty much assume it's going to be something a Clash of Wills boss does, and Melissa is going to be the only one that can get rid of it, because this has not been seen before on units in the game. So this is the first instance of it, and only Melissa can remove whatever this effect is, and we'll find out what that is probably in a few hours. Yeah, so that's 3 times per fight. And then the other one is Shadow of Time. This is 1 time per fight. This one is, again, kind of interesting. So we'll get back to that. It imbues darkness to everything, including the boss, including your party, though. It makes your party absorb darkness for 3 turns. So this is basically the same thing as Kresnik's Magnus. Kresnik is AoE, light imbue, and light absorb for your party for 3 turns. This is darkness for 3 turns. It also 60% amps your party for 3 turns. And it reduces the healing of the enemy by 50%. So you know how previous Clash of Wills, like in Phase 2, Phase 3, the boss begins healing for huge amounts every turn? Well, while this is active, that healing is cut in half. So I guess this is probably going to be a big deal in an upcoming Clash of Wills. We don't know till we see it, but once again, this is a unique effect that no one in the game currently has except for Melissa. She is the only one that can reduce healing. And again, this is only in Clash of Wills. We cannot use this on like Rafflesia or something because it's locked to Clash of Wills. And then her normal attack, where is it? Her normal attack is Purifying Parasol. She can cure zombie. So her normal attack cures zombie. Either give her Blizzard Orbs so she counter attacks and cures, or just force her to normal attack, and that cures zombie to the entire party. So, and the rest of the stuff is just stat bonuses, etc. Oh, and I guess one more thing I should mention as well is as far as all the dark support goes, she's got Dark Imbue, 45 amps, 60 amps, and 100 amps. The one thing she doesn't have is Dark Imperil. She has no way whatsoever to imperil darkness. So, once again, if you want her to be your solo dark supporter for an entire party that doesn't really have darkness, for example, if she's going to be with like 2B, A2, Chizuru, and Sky, and she's doing your 100 Dark Amplify and all that, you need some way to imperil darkness because she has none whatsoever. So just keep that in mind. Overall opinions on the unit. So this is a little tricky. So like I said, a lot of her stuff in her kit is just strictly worse than Sylvie. Like, she can't cure, stop, and charm. Her resistances for elements are worse. The mitigations. Sylvie has 75 to physical and magic. She only has 75 to magic and 50 to physical. She does have 80 to general, though. Sylvie has 85 to general, but only for 3 turns. At EX3, Melissa could have 80% to your party forever. Full uptime. So, that's kind of like a give and take right there. Not strictly worse than Sylvie. But, yeah, other than that, I say she's still pretty good. Is she going to be a must-pull unit? That's a little trickier, because even though she does have the 100 Dark Amplify, and that's really good, don't get me wrong, it is really good. It's just that most of the upcoming units that you're going to be using on a Dark team anyway, like, Dionysius, Sephiroth, Dark Rain, the upcoming Dark Reagan, stuff like that, Shantoto, if you pull for her, they all have a 150 Dark Amplify for bursting anyway, so they don't really need a 100 amp. But this is extremely good for things like, 2B or Chizuru that are going off element. But see, this is a little tricky to recommend, because the thing is, if you're doing a dark team, and we're talking about the leader scale, so if you're doing a dark team with, like, for example, Dionysius, and those units aren't going to be getting the bonuses anyway, so you might not be taking them. I don't know. It's hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge how big of a deal this is in today's game. It's still really good, very, very good, and I'm very happy she has it. I'm just trying to decide if I should say, like, do you need to pull this unit, or is she like, is Sylvie good enough to keep, or do you have to have her? It's a hard call. It's a hard call. She's a good, like, for example, last week or 2 weeks ago, I would say Abigail was extremely good. I would almost say Abigail was a must pull. This one, I don't know. Like, if we're gonna rate Abigail a 9 out of 10, I would rate Melissa something like a 7 out of 10. Like, really good, but she does have some flaws in her kit. She can't do Stop and Charm. She can't imperil Darkness. She's only got 50 physical mitigation, which is worse than Sylvie. But she does have some really good stuff, though. For example, this time magic is exceptional. This is really good sometimes. Other times it's just irrelevant. But sometimes this is incredibly, incredibly good. It really depends on the fight. That said, she's going to have to use it all on herself to keep her stat buffs active. That thing with the stat buff, this right here, this is like really stuck in my teeth. That's just frustrating me so much. I am very frustrated that this stat buff. What was the point? Why would they, a stat buff of all things? Why would they feel like this needed partial uptime? I mean, Gumi, come on. That is just such an irritation. I cannot believe that this got like approved to be handled 3 turn up, 2 turn down. Come on, really? Why? Just why? Man, I don't know. So the unit. I think I personally am going to pull for her. So tomorrow when the server comes up, I'm probably going to pull. I think I'm definitely going to pull. How deep am I going to pull? Well, I'm definitely doing the step up, so I'm going to get the vision card, and we'll see how it goes from there. Do I think the rest of you need to have this unit? Honestly, it's probably going to mostly come down to what does this mean? What is this unknown effect? Is this going to be completely critical to a Clash of Wills? If so, then I guess she's important enough that you must have her. If this is not that big a deal of an effect, then I think maybe you don't need her, but I don't know. She's definitely a hard one to evaluate. Anyway, there's my initial thoughts on the unit. So, good unit. I don't think this is the best unit we've ever seen, but she's very strong. She's very strong. She's very good. I personally do want to have her. I'm going to pull for her. And we'll see how it goes. So, I guess I'll see you guys for the pull video, tomorrow. See you then.